Welcome. It's really good to see y'all. It's been a long week, right? A good week, hopefully, but long week. Lots of things have happened, even while we've been here. Thank you, Apple. I think we're all at a really interesting place, this being the last session. I know we've all probably learned a lot, and we've made the mistake of checking our phones to see what help tickets are waiting for us when we get back to the office on Monday. I'm not looking forward to that. I saw the anxiety level rising at breakfast this morning. But I think we've also discovered new things that we're excited to try and implement, small, big, somewhere in between. I will say it's kind of interesting being the last session of the conference. I found myself editing this presentation quite a bit, even though it is relationships, and really in theory those shouldn't change. But I did feel that there was kind of a change over the conference in the emotion and the anxiety and an awareness that things in technology change. Apple has releases and presentations are rewritten. I'm sure Greg's presentation is different today than it was a couple days ago before the MacBook Pro came out. So I've also rewritten mine because I think that relationships are now, again, they're more relevant. They might feel different because of the anxiety of added things, but they happen. My goal today for this presentation is to help you recognize that you, in fact, need relationships and partners in what you do and where you're at, and hopefully give you some tools to start building and maintaining relationships when you get back. So let's start with who am I and what am I talking about? I am a tech director at a small private school in Seattle. Their budget is really small, so I'm actually not quite full-time. So I fill the rest of my time doing freelance and consulting work. I've worked in a lot of different environments. I worked at Apple, did my time there, retail. I've worked at various schools, private and public, and in my freelance, been able to work with small businesses. I am also a woman in tech, which has brought its own set of struggles. And also, when I worked in education, resources are limited. And I think both of those have really forced me to rely on relationships to accomplish things more, to get that buy-in from the team. I also have, both my parents are therapists. And so whenever I would sit down at the dinner table and say, hey, I'm having this problem, they really didn't have many tech solutions, but often recommended that I think things through from a relational standpoint, which does get annoying, I can say. But it was also really helpful to think about it in that way. So what am I talking about today? I am talking about relationships, if you haven't figured that out already. I'm not talking about networking. Networking is definitely important. It's a lot of what we do here in terms of building those foundational relationships in different facets of the industry to support us along the way. But I'm talking about actually building relationships, and not just in your team, and not just in your organization, but also thinking outside the box. There are people that can really help us, even if they aren't techs, that can be advocates and allies and partners for us along the way. I also recognize that we all come from very diverse teams. Some of us work alone. We are consultants, and so we don't have that immediate office team to fall back on. Some of us work in satellite situations. Some of us work with way too many techs in the office, and that brings its own set of challenges. So I do think that these concepts are applicable in all of those situations, but keep in mind that relationships are mushy in a way, and you really will need to customize them and make them your own. Also, I'm not like an expert on it, because really, who's an expert on relationships? I think that's a given, but I just wanted to clarify that. I think another thing about relationships that's interesting is they do change based on where you're at, but it's not something that's going to change in terms of concepts from now until like a couple years from now. It's interesting to think about how much our jobs have changed. I mean, I've been working in tech for 15 years, and what I did 15 years ago is very different than what I do now. But the relationships that I've built back then, some of them are still with me, and they're still supporting me. And that's really cool to think about in light of everything. So, why should you even bother? I think relationships definitely improves communication amongst your team, amongst your organization. And I think that is kind of perhaps a given in terms of how that can help make things. Improved communication makes things more efficient. So you're communicating your goals more efficiently and more effectively so the team can adapt those, hopefully in a more cohesive way. I think it also makes things more effective. If you have a better sense of what your team needs or who your team is, what your organization needs, it will help you think through how what you're rolling out can be more effective, or how you can support them more effectively. What are their needs? It helps you build trust. And I think that this is something that maybe, I don't know if we struggle with it more as techs, but I feel that often there is an image surrounding the IT admin person. They know that we have access to really sensitive information, and so there is always this kind of wondering what we're doing and can they trust us? And building these relationships really helps with that. In fact, it might be the only way to build trust on the team. I think it also helps you align what you're doing with the overall mission of your organization. And this, again, it varies based on where you're at, but there is always some sort of mission or movement or end point. And building relationships gives you a better understanding of how people articulate those goals and how they understand that vision. Because normally a vision statement is just this one-liner that is still ambiguous in its own way. So understanding how people place themselves within that larger vision will help you align your goals within technology to bring that more buy-in. And that leads to my next point. So I think aligning yourself within the vision helps you get more buy-in for the projects. One of the things I run into all the time in education is a budget issue. There's just never enough money. So, and it's hard to tell a teacher that it is just as important to buy iPads as it is to teach them how to write or add and subtract. But that's where if you can understand and align what you're doing in the larger goal and the larger vision, that's where it helps you get more buy-in. And also it helps increase and improve the awareness of your workload. Again, I think that there's a lot of mystery surrounding what we do in our organizations. And as we begin to build these relationships, people have a better understanding of what we do, the ebb and the flow of our days, which again looks different. But when we have to disappear into the server closet for several hours, we don't have to spend as much time justifying what it is we're doing. If there is that built-in relationship, then there is a better awareness of what we're doing, less questioning. So you can begin to see how much time in the long run this can save you. You're avoiding a lot of those like explanatory conversations or emails, or even I would say documentation is important, but sometimes documenting what you're doing all the time and trying to explain that to your admin team is a lot of work and a lot of time. So trying to avoid that can sometimes be helpful. I think that it will also help you identify strengths on your team. So, and this is where, again, think beyond just your tech team. There are people that are at your organization that might be really talented at writing up a proposal. Or maybe they're really good at negotiating contracts. They might think that the internet comes from the sky, but they might be the exact person you want on your team when you're negotiating a new contract with your ISP. It also will help you identify your own strengths. And I think that this is something I've learned a lot recently is as I've gotten to know the people that I'm working with in the tech community, I've begun to understand what I can bring to the conversation. And I think that this is a really interesting part of this conference too, and that you begin to see there are people that know a lot more than me, but there are still things and experiences that I've had that I can bring. And so I think building, again, those relationships, it helps you understand your own strengths. So what kind of relationships are we talking about? I again, I think relationships can be this rather ambiguous, amorphous thing. And so breaking it into different types of relationships can be a little helpful. So there are partners. So this is kind of the first level of relationships. And these are people who help us get things done. Often there's a shared interest or investment. This is, again, often within the organization. So these could be the people that you are on your team that just help you get stuff done day to day. There's also allies, and those are people who help us grow. So I think that these are people perhaps that have a deeper understanding of what you're trying to do and accomplish. This is where the mutual support within the field, I would say that Slack might be just a ton of allies for us. But again, differentiating between partners and allies. Partners don't have to understand everything you're doing, but you might have a shared goal and they can support you along the way. And then the third that I like to point out is a confidant. And there aren't as many, there tend not to be as many of these. And this is someone who actually helps us shoulder our work. And this is someone who can help you understand yourself better. And understand, for example, are you in the right place? Maybe this isn't the right place for you, or maybe you're in the right place but not necessarily the right role. Or maybe you're in exactly the right place, you just don't know it, or you're not confident enough to step into that role in a way that is successful. This is the person you complain to. This is the person that you share a lot of, maybe some tears, but mostly profanity with. This is the person that you call or text or message when you're so frustrated, you don't even know the questions to ask to get the right answers. Because we're all in that state sometimes, and they help us work through that. And you can imagine how if you have that person, if you've built that confidant relationship, you have that context to work through these issues. If you're trying to pull in a partner and you're throwing up your arms and swearing at them or asking them questions that don't make sense because they don't have that relational context, they're not going to know how to support you. They're not going to have that history with you to help you work through the issues. And a confidant also, you're building a longer relationship, a deeper relationship with them so that you can trust them and that they feel they can give you honest feedback, because that's also important in terms of growing. And also, when they tell you you do a good job, it feels really good because they have a deep understanding of what you're doing. So I will say that sometimes these exist in the same person. Sometimes a partner is an ally. Often they move from one to the other, so you start a relationship out as a partner and it moves into an ally. I would say that it's not necessarily the best idea to have all three in the one person, but it happens, you know. And I would also think about if there are overlaps, if the partner who's trying to help you get stuff done is also the person you're complaining to, that's a little difficult, because then they have a harder time buying in and carrying the energy of the project. So you can begin to think about how it's helpful to kind of compartmentalize these things. So I know that these are a little mushy in terms of categories. Are there any questions initially before I move on to the next part? Okay, that's fine. I'll keep going.
Excuse me, would be nice, and you're going to refer back to these through the rest of your presentation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I will refer back to these. Since you guys are totally clear on relational types, we'll move on. I want you just to think about who are you engaging with on a day-to-day basis? Who is your team? And again, this doesn't have to be who you're working with, but when you go back on Monday and you have that list of things that blew up while you were gone, and you also have the list of things you want to implement from this conference, what is your team? Who's going to help you with that? What does that look like for you? So I just want to give you a few minutes to think about that. If you want to write names down, that's great. Who are the people that you're going to lean on to accomplish these tasks? And now, as you think about these people, start putting them into these categories. Like, who are the partners? Who are the allies? Are there confidants? There will be holes. I don't think there are many people that have all of these, or maybe enough of them. I'm gonna make you guys talk to each other. I haven't seen this done in any other presentation, so we're gonna see how this goes. But here's what I want you to do. Just like pair up with someone. They don't have to be perfect groups. They can be 3 people. There can be 5, might be a lot, but I'm sure you can make it work. And I want you to talk through a few things. What was it like looking at your team? Thinking about what Monday will look like and who's going to be there with you. And do you feel supported? Do you feel isolated? Do you feel overwhelmed? Is there anything that surprised you? So I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 minutes and see how that goes. And we'll regroup. It's not too bad, guys. Try it. Just talk to one another. You can do this.
Outside of work. Are you a musician too?
I probably wouldn't do it, but
Oh yeah. I mean, I was just talking to the guy who was running the security, or not security, it was another session Wednesday. He was like a bass player. That IT. away from the rest of my team.
Yeah.
In my team, like I'm the math guy, and everybody else is like Windows.
So they're all like,
Kinda.
yeah.
But I definitely have partners. I mean, like, you know, there's one of the Windows guys I work a lot with. Like, I help. He does a little bit of math support, and then I cover some Windows stuff for him down there. Yeah. I hope your mic was muted. I hope your mic was muted. No, I know. Just teasing. I was wondering about it. We were doing a session with the we did a review of that session, and I wanted to actually check.
No, I don't think it was.
Oh, is he doing that right now?
So this is like a 1-minute warning to kind of wrap up thoughts. Okay, I'm gonna have to cut you off. But I mean, this is great. I love all the conversations that are taking place. They might not be about this, but still, they're great. Does anyone have anything they want to share out with the group? Observations, things that surprised you, questions that came out of this? And we have this scary box. This is like literally the thing I was the most nervous about with this presentation.
It is kind of scary though,
It
because
is.
it's like flying projectiles.
It is.
I realized that for the first time in 5 years, I am no longer overwhelmed, and that was kind of nice. So
That's awesome.
that was a good feeling.
Great. Relish that. That's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
I'm like a ninja.
Anyone else? And that's a great thought. We can do that.
This only just occurred to me after the conversation, but I didn't even think to think through what for whom I might be these roles to other people.
That's a really good point. Because, I mean, there are moments, obviously, when things are mutual, but sometimes the confidant role is maybe a little bit more one-sided. But somebody's a confidant to you, and you're a confidant to someone else. And what does that look like? And how can you be a good confidant? And how can you be a good ally or partner to someone? So, yeah, thank you. As we go through this, think about it in both directions.
There you go. In looking at those three groups, I'd put probably allies and then partners and then your confidence. And the reason why I say that, because I really feel that I have more allies out there in IT if I choose to use them, right? If I reach out through, the different communication channels that we have today, I can find people who can ally with me to do something or provide information. Partners, it begins to get into that relationship role.
Mm-hmm.
And you develop those partners, and you want a long-term partnership,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as long-term as your confidence,
Right.
right? Who are maybe one or two people. I've drawn a little chart for myself where my allies can be hundreds of people, my partners maybe 20 or 30, but my confidants are really only like 3 or 4.
And that's
Those
fine.
are the people I can
That's
pick
a
up
lot.
the phone for and say, hey, there's blood on the wall and I need your help. So,
Right. We've all been there.
right.
Hopefully not actual blood. Yeah, and again, I think that those are all really good points. It's going to look different for all of us. Some of us are going to need more allies than partners and vice versa. And the length of those partnerships and the need of how long those need to be, that's going to vary a lot based on where we're at. And again, these don't have to be in tech. I would really challenge you to think about these things, outside your department or organization. A confidant doesn't have to have a clear understanding of what you're doing. They can have a clear understanding of who you are and what you bring and what's important to you long term. And hopefully who you are and what's important to you goes beyond tech. I would assume that for everybody. If you had a lot of gaps, please don't be overwhelmed. That's not the point of this presentation. All of us are at very different places in our careers and in our life. This is really just to help you understand what you need and to begin those conversations and to begin advocating for yourself and taking time to make these things happen and prioritizing them to some extent. I've floated this idea in conversations for a while, and I meet people at large organizations that don't have confidants, that have worked in their fields for decades and don't have that person they can go to. And they are very overwhelmed, I will say that. So don't beat yourself up if there are holes. Definitely just take it as an opportunity. We have another comment.
So now the confidant, is this someone at work, or is this your spouse? Or
I mean, I don't know if I would go as far to say your spouse. I mean, there's definitely elements of a spouse that can be helpful. But there might be like issues at home, and sometimes there might be issues at home, like when you come home and you bring work home with you, that like get into that marital relationship. And it might be nice to have a confidant outside that can help you with that. So I would challenge you to actually think outside your organization and outside your house if you can, just because they're giving you a more neutral perspective, and they can advocate for you in a different way. So it's a good question, though. And again, there are these categories, but they're not clear cut. So, we have one more question.
So I have more of a comment rather than a question, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I've found that when you're building these partnerships, allies or confidants or strategic partnerships, that having a mentor outside your organization is helpful because that mentor becomes a partner and an ally and a confidant all bundled in one.
I think that confidants can definitely be mentors. I think that they often do fall into the category of having been in your trade for a little bit longer than you or in a different capacity than you, and they can help you work through those issues and move you along. But I would caution against them being your only partner and your only ally. I would look to have partners in your organization and on your team if possible. And keeping those things separate, I think, does help along the way, because if they are focused on helping you get something done and helping you push things along, but also helping you grow as an individual, that's a lot for them to hold, and they're not going to do as good of a job with all three of those. So that's also something to think about, and that's something to think about for yourself as well. If you're a confidant for someone, you might not be the best partner. There might be somebody else that on their team that you can kind of point them to that can help them get things done. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how do we actually find these people and how do we maintain these. So here are just kind of the basics. So there's the initiate stage, cultivating and nurturing. I initially had this wonderful seed metaphor. You plant a seed and you water it and it grows. I was like, these are texts. So I would say let's talk about it in terms of maybe an OS release. Initiate would be like the alpha beta, and then cultivate is the actual release, and nurture would be those essential updates along the way. And then the whole cycle starts over again, right? So let's go through these a little bit more in depth. So initiate, I would say it kind of relies on two things. I mean, again, these are broad and you can run with these, but listening is really where we start. And I know this is a basic, and for those of us that have worked at Apple, we've like been, beat over the head with this idea of listening. But it's something that's really easy to forget. We've all been in sessions here at this conference, I'm sure, where a person said they had a question, and really they just talked for a really long time. And I can't blame them. We all want to be heard. We are not heard enough in where we're at. I don't think that techs are really the people in any office that get a lot of like front face time. Usually it is the, head of the school or the principal or the VP that's talking, and we're in the background a lot. And so there is that desire to be heard, but this is not the place for it. So try and put those things aside and really think about what it means to listen. And listening is really key because it's going to give you the clues as to whether this person is a partner to begin with. You don't know where they're going to fall into these relational roles until you get to know them a little bit. But I was thinking this morning, like, can I guarantee this? If you ask somebody 10 questions, you're going to find a place that something overlaps in terms of goals or vision or mission. I really do think that, because there are those places that we can come together, and listening is what's going to give you that initial in. In general, you should maybe be asking more questions than you're answering. So, and hopefully that leads to more of a conversation. Have follow-up questions. Allow them to feel heard. So it's not just finding out about what they're doing, but it's also building that relationship and that trust up, making them feel that you are genuinely interested, hopefully you are genuinely interested in who they are and what they're doing, and hoping to find that place of overlap. I had an example of this from recent. In my current job at the school, we are moving to Google from Office 365 and from a aging server. And there's a person in finance that is completely opposed to any sort of cloud anything because security, horrible. Somebody's going to hack it, as if our server is really all that secure. But that's another story. She's very opposed to me and bringing all of these cloud things that I'm bringing. So I was like, you know what? I'm determined to find an overlap. Had a lot of conversations with her and found that she's really frustrated right now with entering in all the expenses from each of the departments. So right now the teachers just submit her receipts and she has to enter them into a spreadsheet, and they don't know how much money they've spent, so she has to tell them, and there's a lot of back and forth. You see where I'm going with this. So once I realized that, I was like, oh, well, we can just ignore this whole cloud thing and focus on the collaborative piece of Google Sheets. This is great. But I couldn't just go there straight away. So that's where the cultivate piece comes in. I could have just said, hey, I've got this great idea, it's going to solve all your problems. But I think it's helpful to invite people into a situation where they feel a part of something. They feel empowered, and it's not just that you're imposing your idea on them, but you're actually asking them to join you, and you're asking them to help you accomplish something. So in the case of the finance person, I reached out to her and I said, you know what, I think it would be really helpful if we could all collaborate more. Maybe you can help me think through ways we can sell this and roll this out to the team. And so I invited her into the conversation and into the rollout. And because of that, it was really, we were more focused on a goal together. We were focused on rolling out Google successfully and rolling out, in this case, Google Sheets and Team Drives successfully. And so she was an advocate for cloud, and she didn't really think much about the security anymore because there was this other goal. Yes, it's an ongoing conversation that comes up, but because she understands that I'm doing this for partially to help her job be easier and more efficient and more effective, she can then see the process as not just something I'm imposing on the institution. So And along the way, you have to engage with that person. So you're inviting them into the process, but then you're checking in with them along the way and making sure that this is still something that they're buying into, that this still aligns with their needs, but also the needs of the larger community. So you ask follow-up questions, and find out what their are there frustrations, what do they need. You still need to continue to engage and give them space to articulate where they're at and how you can join them. And then the next one is nurturing. And I know that for me, feedback sometimes can be a kind of cold word, a cold concept, where it's like, I imagine this meeting with someone higher up than me, and we're sitting at a table awkwardly, and they're reading from a list of bullet points of everything that I should be doing better. It doesn't have to be like that. Feedback is essential for us to move forward, to grow. I mean, we audit our systems as techs all the time, and feedback is really just auditing a relationship of some sort. And you can start a conversation more casually. Like, you could say, wow, how did we do? And then you're starting this kind of feedback loop. Or you can say, whoa, that was really rough. Like, that did not go as we planned. So you're putting the we in it. So it's this relationship, this relational thing that you're doing. You can say, that was great. We did a really good job. And that's important too. If it was successful, or if there are parts of it that were successful, that's part of the feedback. Feedback isn't just things that you need to do better, but also understanding what you did well. And those are things that need to be talked about and celebrated and discussed. And then there's always what's next. What can we do? What can we continue to do moving forward and carry on from this experience? And what can we do better? Because change, and change is really important. Relationships are things that are going to change and grow. Confidants are things that happen over time. And so we need to be flexible, and that a partnership might look different. It might move to an ally. An ally might move to a confidant. I know that change can be difficult for all of us. Like Greg is talking right now about how imaging might be dead. But it's something that is important, and we need to be flexible in our relationships and open to that. So that's kind of the basic process. This is going to look a little different based on what type of relationship you're looking at. So kind of what I was saying earlier from partners, you kind of start at the beginning, and then you get to feedback, and it might loop back, and they might just stay as a partner, but it can also move into an ally. So again, nurturing a partnership includes that feedback, and that can lead to you finding an opportunity to move someone into an ally. So it can also be a different timeline depending on a person. You might start a new job and have a conversation with someone, brainstorm through an issue that they're having, and they move from a partner straight up to an ally right away. And that's fine. There's not a set amount of time that this process has to take. Again, it's going to be different with each person. So I just wanted to pause and see if there are any questions about this process. All right, so can you do this? I think that you can. But what is this going to look like in your environment? Like, again, what is it going to look like when you go back on Monday? As you're thinking about those holes that you came up with earlier, how are you going to initiate finding these partners and these allies and these confidants? So I just want to, again, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to kind of think about what that will look like when you head back into your work environment. Looking again at that list of names of people that you see as partners, or maybe there's a list of people that you see as potential partners. What's it going to look like to initiate this relationship with them, to begin to partner with them? So I'm just going to let you think about that. Yep, I'm gonna make you do it again. All right, so if you wanna pair back up with your group, have you think about a few things. What feels hard as you head back into this, as you look at advocating for yourself and building up these relationships and getting support for yourself? What's exciting? What might be a relief? And are there any places you feel totally stuck? Like, you know you're supposed to initiate with somebody, but you're not sure how. You can't imagine what that would look like. So I'm gonna give you guys another like 4 to 5 minutes to talk about that, and then we'll regroup. And we can address some of those issues. Gonna give you guys a 1-minute warning here. Okay, there's like a little lull in the conversations. I'm gonna try and take advantage of that. Bring us back in here, maybe. I'm very tempted to use like a cheesy kindergarten teacher thing. 1, 2, eyes on you. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Anybody? Oh, come on. Quiet fingers. We can try those. What came up? What are some things that people want to share? These can be, again, surprises, epiphanies, excitements, questions. We got to do with the box again.
So one of the things I'm learning, and this is more common again, is that relationships at whatever level, ally, partner, confidant, they're messy. And you have to agree to that right up front, because if you don't, you'll either not engage at all, or you'll engage and get discouraged, or you'll go back to your own little den and say, okay, I tried, but no success. But you have to stay at it and stay at it and stay at it, and then you discover that you've got some really deep relationships that are worth hanging on to. And other ones you have to just apologize for and say, hey, we're not getting along, so hey, no offense, but I got to step away from this because this is toxic. So they're messy, but they're well worth investing in.
I really appreciate that. I have 2 things from there. There's no debug console for relationships, but they are messy, right? And there's going to be things that you're going to have to adjust. But stick with it. I think you'll figure it out. And to that end, there are going to be those people that you maybe want to partner with, or you were partnered with, that you can't be partners with anymore. You have to just acknowledge that there will always be those people in any situation that you just don't connect with. And I wouldn't say that it's you. I mean, if it's 90% of your organization you feel you're not connecting with, then let's have a conversation. But if there's a few of those people, most likely it's something in their own lives that's blocking them from connecting to anyone. And generally you find that a lot of people in the organization feel disconnected from those individuals. But I think it's helpful to just know that there are those people that are not open to relationships. And that's just a reality. You have to be aware of that and protect yourself and not try and push in too hard. Yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind. Thank you for bringing that up. This is also kind of the questions section. So if you have any questions at all or thoughts.
Never good at sports. A difficulty that we discussed is sort of lack of any kind of commonality with our colleagues, okay? Like I'm a lot older than my colleagues, and I'm a lot more comfortable with my life than my colleagues, and so it's sort of difficult in my own particular role, you know, because you're talking about relationships sort of between equals.
I mean, yes and no.
You know, and so that seems that's a difficult nut for me to crack. Is you know, how can I talk to this person when they're just constantly telling me how wonderful the reruns of Friends are, you know?
I mean, I think that is a very common challenge. I work in a pre-K through 5th grade school, and in theory, some of my internal customers are pre-K students. And they are difficult people to communicate with sometimes, definitely. We actually tried to do Hour of Code in the pre-K classroom, and that was an adventure, definitely an adventure. So it is a challenge, I will acknowledge that, but I don't think that it's something that you can't surpass. I think that, yes, we are all different. Thank God we are all different in lots of different ways. But I do think that there are still things that connect us. And I think it just takes a little bit of time and listening to find those connections. You might have to endure listening to them talking about reruns of TV shows that you have no idea what they are. But eventually you'll get beyond that, right? And I think you'll find a place that you will connect at. I mean, we all have dreams. We all have things that we care deeply about. I avoided getting into politics here, and I think a lot of people have done a good job at avoiding politics at this conference, but it was tempting. There are those people, though, that you disagree with, but I think, again, at core, there are those things that are inherently important to all of us. But it's a challenge to think beyond those sometimes. Like, I would almost put on here that maybe a challenge was trying to connect with Windows people, right? But I'm actually now in a dual environment, and that's been really helpful for me because I've now found other ways to connect. So maybe it is trying to enter into their world a little bit more so that you do find those overlap places. Are there other thoughts or areas people felt they were getting stuck, like hurdles they couldn't see themselves getting past, or brilliant ideas of ways to connect with people that they want to share? Coffee. I'm from Seattle. I'm really looking forward to going back home to good coffee. Sorry. It's probably what I'm most excited about, to be honest. But coffee is great. So true. Yeah, there are a lot of little ways to start this.
Oh, there we go. One of the things that I would caution folks is that your avocations, mine might be whiskey, yours might be coffee, are not necessarily shared or necessarily safe for others. Some people my mom has AFib. She can't drink coffee anymore. It was something that we bonded over. And now I miss that. Some people have decided that certain beverages are not safe for them personally or culturally prohibited. And so find other ways to connect with those people. Seek them out. Just because you can't go get a drink after work doesn't mean you can say, hey, do you want to go get like a smoothie after work today? Or do you want to maybe meet in the morning for some tasty oat milk? No, don't ever say those. Those words are not English. But I would strongly encourage people to get outside of your own comfort zone to bond with someone you don't necessarily know. And say, hey, what are you doing today before the office? Do you want to go meet up someplace? Or what are you doing after work today? Do you want to catch a game of Frisbee golf? Frisbee golf is usually pretty safe, ideas. But also I'm a coastal elite. We have lots of those. But I would encourage people to not necessarily fall back on the happy hour and or coffee before work, because those may not necessarily be culturally appropriate.
Also, don't forget that you can connect over frustrations.
Yes.
Like, teachers hate copy machines as much as I do. And so it's great. I love it. But that's where we often meet. I'll just hang out by the copy machine, especially the first week of school, because it always jams, and it jams constantly. And I am just as frustrated as they are. And that shared moment of, like, trying to reach behind that one and get that one piece of construction paper that somebody ran through the copy machine, is it's a bonding experience, and you have that overlap, and you become partners, even if just in that moment to get that damn piece of construction paper out of the copy machine. So keep that in mind too. There are a lot of ways to connect. And that said, they don't have to be planned. They don't have to be long. They can be little moments in the hallway. And I think the key is to be open to those. Make time in your day, prioritize those moments. When you're walking into an office to troubleshoot and that something sparks a conversation, you see a ticket stub from a concert of an artist that you like, take that moment. Think in your head that's time well spent. There might be another fire that you have to put out, but it's going to be, a 5-minute conversation? And that 5 minutes, that might save you half an hour later down the road. So again, I think part of it is, coming up with creative ways to connect with people, but I think a lot of it is just being open to it and recognizing that this is something we really need to prioritize. We cannot do this work alone. Were there any other thoughts? So I wanted to close by saying thank you, not for coming, but just to who you are and for coming to this conference. There's the information shared here, I think this year particularly is a little daunting. We don't know what's coming in a lot of ways, and we don't know what we're going to be dealing with next year, especially in terms of Apple and deployments. We need allies and partners and confidence. But each time I come to this conference and or go to a MacAdmin meetup in Seattle, I'm reminded of what an amazing group of people this community is. And we can be a little awkward sometimes, but at core, I think we are working really hard to empower and support our users. And to do this, we have to work together. Because of each of our environments, they bring their own challenges. But the fact that we still show up to work each day and show up to Slack each day is an indicator that we are not in this alone. And none of us expect to do this alone. We've already figured that out. And I think that that is one of the hardest parts. I really wish that other teams and industries would figure this out. I wish the teachers at my school felt the support that I feel here. I think that's one reason I wanted to give this talk. Because I think if we can engage with the people outside this community and perhaps build little offshoot, like MacAdmin-esque communities, I think that we can really begin to impact our workplaces, but also just people in general, and to really bring people together and connect them. The relationship in this community, they've changed my life. And I hope that you will continue to change others. So thank you.